Warm greetings to all researchers, scientists, professors, and students. On behalf of ICWR, I welcome you all. International Consortium of Water Researchers, ICWR, a non-profit consortium, operates with an objective to connect water-based researchers and scientists all over the world. It is promoted and supported by international and national advisory committee members of various research and educational institutions across the globe. ICWR operates with interest towards enriching the knowledge at 4 different stages as water fellows, water experts, young professionals, and student members. ICWR does this through organizing webinar series, trainings, and workshops on water-based modeling and annual virtual conferences. We also further our objective by operating effectively among the water-based research aspirants at all levels. So far, we have organized 8 webinars to international and national experts. With this short introduction about ICWR, I would like to introduce Professor Luigi Rizzo from Italy for our 9th webinar of ICWR. And to introduce one thing which comes into my mind is he's a very important person in advanced oxidation process. He's a coordinator for International PhD School on Advanced Oxidation Process. He's having more than 20 years of research experience in water-based studies, and he's having more than 130 plus research articles, books, and book chapters to his credit. And he's having more than 7,500 plus citations. And currently he's working on the treatment of industrial wastewater through combination of advanced and biological oxidation processes, treatment of oil wastewater using innovative advanced oxidation process, and even the tertiary treatment of urban wastewater using advanced photoactivated processes. So I feel very happy to introduce him to the community of water researchers. And Professor Rizzo. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon and good night, possibly, because you are connected from different geographical area. And I would like first to thank Dr. Padmanabhan for this kind invitation. And I would like also to acknowledge him for this kind introduction. And as you know, so my talk will be focused on advanced treatment of urban wastewater and reuse. And I will show you some results even from our groups on the effect of, in particular, of advanced oxidation processes on contaminants of emerging concern. So this is the framework of the presentation. So I will first talk about challenges in urban wastewater treatment with a particular focus on chemical and biological contaminants of emerging concern. Then I will briefly introduce the wastewater reuse problem, in particular with a focus on the recently approved European regulation on wastewater reuse. Then I will briefly introduce the advanced treatment of urban wastewater. And in particular, I will talk about consolidated and new methods of advanced treatment of urban wastewater with a specific focus on contaminants of emerging concern. And finally, I will give you the conclusion of the presentation and I will talk about some pending question as well. So let's see if we can move to the next slide. Okay. So if we talk about urban wastewater treatment, one of the relevant issue to address for wastewater disposal, in particular for wastewater reuse, one critical issue in particular for use, as you possibly know, is the inactivation of a pathogen. And sometimes this can be a critical issue in urban wastewater treatment. In the last decades, we have an emerging challenges in urban wastewater treatment that deal with the occurrence in wastewater of contaminants of emerging concern. Contaminants of emerging concern are pollutants typically occurring at a really low concentration in water and wastewater. And we talked about nanogram per liter, microgram per liter. But despite a so low concentration, these contaminants, since these contaminants, or most of them, are poorly biodegradable, can persist in the environment after the disposal and can accumulate in the environment with possible toxic effect or not predictable effect. In addition to chemicals, contaminants of emerging concern, when we talk about this category, we also talk about typically of antibiotic resistance. And so we talked about the occurrence in the water and wastewater of antibiotics, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and the other mobile genetic elements that may contribute to the transfer of antibiotic resistance into the environment. So in this slide, you can see some of the categories that we can include in the family of contaminants of emerging concern. So we have pharmaceuticals, we have antibiotic-resistant determinants, which means antibiotics, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, antibiotic-resistant genes. We have personal care products, pesticides, nanoparticles, and even other contaminants. One of the main concerns in the last years, for sure, is the spread of antibiotic resistance and the contribution of the environment and human activities on the spread of antibiotic resistance. In this slide, you can see on the right side a picture that I withdrew from internet that depicts what is the scenario of the actual scenario in different geographical area in the world in terms of estimated deaths per year in the different countries, in different area. So one of the hotspots for the release of antibiotic resistance determinants into the environment, which can contribute to the spread of antibiotic resistance, are urban wastewater treatment plants effluents. Because these wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove antibiotic resistance determinants, and so these are continuously released into the environment. So antibiotics, antibiotic resistance bacteria, and genes. Moreover, we do not have a specific regulation with limits for the release of such contaminants in the environment. This slide can be useful to understand in which way we can evaluate the advanced treatment processes with regard to the control of antibiotic resistance. Because when we have a look to the mechanism of antibiotic resistant transfer, we can also better understand which parameter we are expected to monitor during the process in order to understand if the investigated process is actually potentially effective in tackling such challenge. So the mechanism, the first mechanism is conjugation. In conjugation mechanism, as you can see, there is a resistant donor cell that came into contact with another cell, non-resistant recipient cell, through the pilus, through which DNA can be exchanged. And in this way, the former non-resistant recipient cell will transform to a resistance transconjugate cell. Another possible mechanism is the transduction. In such a case, because of the stress or because to, for instance, disinfection process in water and wastewater treatment, bacterial cell can be damaged. And in such a case, genetic material can be released. In this case, you can see that, for instance, phage carrying resistant genes can be released from the damaged cell, from the deaf cell, and so then they can carry antibiotic resistance genes to other bacterial cells. Another transfer mechanism is so-called natural transformation. In this case, again, because of the damage of or the death of cells, the genetic material is released from the bacterial cell. And so in this case, we talk about extracellular DNA or free DNA that can be get from a non-resistant cell, a recipient cell that in this case will be transformed in a resistant cell. So when we talk about advanced treatment of urban wastewater, if we wish to evaluate the process efficiency in terms of bacterial antibiotic resistance transfer, we should evaluate the process in terms of inactivation of bacteria through different methods, as we can see, because the higher the concentration of bacteria, the higher the concentration of antibiotic resistance bacteria, the higher the capacity to transfer the antibiotic resistance. And so we can monitor antibiotic resistant bacterial cells. We can also monitor free DNA, so antibiotic resistance genes, because this is also will be a method to evaluate process efficiency. So what are the contamination pathways that between the urbanized environments and the target of the pollutants? So these contaminants of emerging concern are produced in different environments, as you can see from the slide, from hospitals where we can find antibiotics, antibiotic-resistant bacteria genes in the water and in wastewater. They can be produced from factories, from pharmaceuticals, factories, for example, from husbandry, or from urbanized area. And in such a case, the wastewater, the effluent of such settlements can be released directly into the environment, or eventually they can be collected in the sewer and get the urban wastewater treatment plants. And in this way, they can interact, so they can affect the environment, they can affect human health indirectly through, for example, wastewater reuse. So the problem of wastewater reuse is really important because due to the water scarcity, the water demand, the fresh water demand is constantly increasing in different countries. And so wastewater reuse for sure is an opportunity to provide water to areas which are affected by water scarcity. In different countries, we have specific regulation on wastewater reuse, but for instance, in Europe, only last June, a regulation on wastewater reuse was approved. Actually, the discussion started some years ago when the European Union asked the Joint Research Center to provide a a technical document to be used for to finalize the wastewater reuse regulation. Moreover, the European Union asked the two scientific committees, EFSA from one side and SCHEER from another side. I was in the water use group from SCHEER that evaluated this technical document for GRC. Anyway, these two scientific committees agreed that the technical document from GRC did not take in sufficient consideration the risk related to the occurrence of contaminants of emerging concern and antibiotic resistance determinants into the wastewater. Finally, as I told you before, the European Union approved the wastewater reuse regulation last May 25, and in some way the legislator took into account the risk related to the occurrence of contaminants of emerging concern, antibiotic resistance, even if they did not set any specific limit. In particular, in the Article 5 of the new regulation, as you can see, the European Union asked competent authority to ensure that a water reuse risk management plan is established. Moreover, the water reuse risk management plan shall be based on some key elements and given in the so-called Annex 2. And as you can see in this Annex 2, in the section B, conditions related to additional requirements are explained. And as you can see in these additional requirements to take into account when finalizing the risk management plan, are also included other substances of emerging concern, in addition to pesticides, disinfection byproducts, pharmaceuticals, and also antimicrobial resistance should be taken into account in the risk management plan. Moreover, in the section C of the Annex 2, as you can see, the European Union legislator also asked for preventive measures in order to address such challenges by talking about additional disinfection or pollutant removal measures. So, as possibly most of you know, one of the most used process in wastewater treatment is looks like the scheme that you can see in this slide. And so this system in several countries are used with the mechanical pretreatment, primary settling tank, biological process. In this case, I given here an example with one of the most used biological process in wastewater treatment plants, which is activated sludge process. In particular, you can see that there is a unit and can be present a unit and an anaerobic unit for phosphorus removal, and an oxic unit for nitrification, and an aeration tank for nitrification, followed by secondary settling. Sometimes different technologies are used for urban wastewater treatment in the biological process, such as membrane biological reactor. And in such a case, we do not longer need secondary settling because we have the membrane, or moving bed biofilm reactor. So this process, in order to address the challenges that we talked about before, this process typically is not sufficient to successfully address such challenges. So advanced treatment should be implemented where missing. This advanced treatment should include a filtration unit at least, and in order to remove contaminants of emerging concern, they should include other processes such as adsorption, such as eventually membrane as a tertiary treatment, or advanced oxidation processes. So if you use advanced oxidation processes, these processes can remove contaminants of emerging concern, and in the same time, they can also inactivate microorganisms. So you don't need an additional disinfection step. On the opposite, if you use a desorption process, in such a case, a desorption process is not so effective in the inactivation of bacteria because it is not a disinfection process. So in such a case, in particular, in the case of wastewater reuse, an additional treatment, in particular a disinfection process, should be applied. So let's talk about the effect of this advanced treatment on contaminants of emerging concern and antibiotic resistance. In this context, when I talked about consolidated treatment, I will talk about activated carbon adsorption by granular activated carbon or powdered activated carbon, or ozonation, because in this context, I considered consolidated these processes because they are applied at the full scale for advanced treatment of urban wastewater in some countries. For instance, in Europe, these processes are the best available technologies currently applied in Switzerland and Germany. Anyway, we can also talk about new methods. New methods, in this case, I talked about photo-driven advanced oxidation processes. Take care that in this, for sure, advanced oxidation processes are not new methods. But in this context, I talked about these methods as new methods because they are not yet applied at the full scale in advanced treatment of urban wastewater. Ozonation is also an advanced oxidation process. It is the only one process applied in the advanced treatment of urban wastewater for the removal of contaminants of emerging concern. Advanced oxidation processes, as possibly most of you are aware of, promote the formation of radical species that can effectively degrade and oxidize organic and inorganic contaminants in water and wastewater, as well as they can inactivate microorganisms. Among these processes, homogeneous photo-driven advanced oxidation processes, in particular UV radiation H2O2, hydrogen peroxide, and photofenton, have more chance to be used as advanced tertiary treatment in urban wastewater treatment plants compared to heterogeneous photocatalytic processes in the short term. This is because of some limitation in heterogeneous photocatalytic processes related to the management of the catalyst, possible recovery of the catalyst, or eventually related to technological issue, such as the method to fix the catalyst on a support. Another issue to emphasize in the application or possible application of advanced oxidation processes as advanced treatment of urban wastewater is that can be in a photoactivated process, we can replace artificial light with sunlight. So we also have as a possible, solar-driven photo-driven advanced oxidation processes. So among the consolidated processes that, as already told you, are applied at the full scale, in particular in Switzerland, where a specific regulation on the removal of contaminants of emerging concern is effective since January 2015, if I'm not wrong. So in this case, adsorption process and ozonation are among the most used treatment for urban wastewater, for advanced treatment of urban wastewater. As you can see from this table, we put in a paper published last year with the colleagues from the nereus cost action. We summarized the effect of these processes, in particular of powdered activated carbon and ozonation, on different chemical contaminants of emerging concern. So in this table, you can see the expected abatement, at least the removal observed in different paper. If I'm not wrong, we summarize this table just publication dealing with the real wastewater. And most of these, I think, are also paper dealing with the full-scale wastewater treatment plants. So you can see that we classify the removal in 3 categories: low, intermediate, and high. And so in the bottom of the table, you can see the abatement. So high means removal higher than 80%, intermediate removal between 50 and 80%, and the low removal means removal below 50%. So in this slide, you can also see what are the costs for the implementation of adsorption or ozonation process as advanced treatment of urban wastewater. You can find this table in the same publication, and this table was prepared by colleagues from Germany and from Switzerland according to full-scale wastewater treatment plan in that countries. And so as expected, you can see that the cost, the specific capital annual cost in euros per cubic meter of treated wastewater, as expected, decrease drastically as the size of the wastewater treatment plant increase. On the horizontal axis, you can see in a logarithmic scale the population equivalent served by the wastewater treatment plant. And so the symbols are different. So the blue one refers to ozone treatment cost, the green one to the powder activated carbon, and the orange one to the granular activated carbon. So if we take a look to the new processes, as I told you, these processes have been widely investigated so far at lab and even at the pilot scale, but do not find yet application at full scale. Some of the most investigated processes include those in the following list. So we have a Fenton process, UV hydrogen peroxide, UV free chlorine, UV peracetic acid, UV persulfates, heterogeneous photocatalysis, and solar-driven advanced oxidation processes. So for sure, one of the most investigated processes, photo-driven advanced oxidation processes, is photofenton, in particular solar photofenton. And in this case, when we should take into account that for people that are not so familiar with the photofenton process typically is effective under acidic pH condition. However, when we talk about wastewater, urban wastewater treatment, the target are contaminants of emerging concern at really low concentration, so nanogram, microgram per liter. So in such a case, we do not need so high concentration of the reagents, iron, salt, and hydrogen peroxide. And so in such a case, we can also operate under moderate or approximately neutral condition without the process is affected so much, because normally when the pH is higher than 3, iron salts precipitate and are no longer available for an effective reaction. Anyway, in advanced treatment of urban wastewater, the target contaminants occur at a really low concentration, so the process sometimes can be also effective under circumneutral condition. And but this process is strongly affected by the characteristic of wastewater, because obviously if the wastewater, if some interfering substances such as carbonates, such as salts, such as nitrogen compounds. In this case, the problem could be that also the problem can be that these substances interfere and interact with the hydroxyl radicals, and so they make the process less effective. So then we can use, even as I told you, solar radiation. So we have a solar-driven advanced solar photophantom. And in this case, you can see that another interesting issue is the use of chelating agents. What does it mean? It means that when the characteristics of the wastewater are not so favorable for such a process, we can use chelating agents such as EDDS that can form complex with iron to prevent the precipitation of the iron even at the neutral pH condition. In this way, the process is more effective. So if you take a look to the figure on the upside of the slide, you can see here a comparison. These are experiments that we performed in our lab, a comparison between different solar-driven advanced oxidation processes, homogeneous and heterogeneous. And you can see that in this case, in terms of removal of target contaminants of emerging concern, namely carbamazepine, we can see that the most effective process was solar photophantom with EDDS. Then the other effective process was photophantom, solar photophantom, but was less effective. And even less effective was heterogeneous photocatalysis with the nitrogen-doped TiO2. Okay. So another processes that has been recently attract a lot of interest in the scientific committee is the combination of UV radiation with the persulfates. In such a case, this advanced oxidation process promotes the formation of sulfate radicals. So in this table, you can see summarized some of the works available in scientific literature. I took this table from the reference you can see on the bottom of the table. And you can see that with this process, high efficiency in the removal of some emerging contaminants can be achieved if you look at this column degradation with the removal even higher than 90%. Anyway, most of this study, and it is really important, deal with aqueous solution of molecule water or deionized water. So this should be taken into account because, as I told you, it's really important to investigate the process in real water matrix because of the occurrence of interfering substances allow us to better understand what can be the actual efficiency of the process. Another process recently investigating the removal of emerging contaminants from urban wastewaters is UV-free chlorine. As you possibly know, free chlorine is one of the most used disinfectants in urban wastewater treatments. And this process, however, is not so effective in the removal of contaminants of emerging concern. So different authors investigated this process in combination with the UV radiation. So in this plot, you can see the comparison between two processes. So UV hydrogen peroxide and UV chlorine. This is a work from Gu et al. 2018, published in Water Research. And you can see the efficiency, at least the kinetics of the reaction in two different groups of contaminants. And you can see the efficiency compared to control test with UV photolysis and dark oxidation. We also investigate the UV-free chlorine process. This is a collaboration with the colleagues from Plataforma Solar de Almería in Spain, with my colleagues and friend, Professor Sixto Malato. And in this case, we also investigated the effect of V-free process in real urban wastewater spiked with different 4 contaminants of emerging concern. And so you can see in the plot that the process was really effective in the removal of contaminants compared to free chlorine as a standalone process. And here you can see the effect on each contaminant. But in addition to this one, our objective was also to investigate the effect of the UV radiation on the formation of trihalometanes. Trihalometanes are the main disinfection byproducts of chlorination. And so, as you can see from this plot, just after the treatment, coupling UV radiation with the free chlorine in diluted wastewater and real wastewater resulted in a lower formation of chloroform, which is the main trihalomethane, compared to the chlorine process alone. Most important, for instance, in Italy, the regulation for wastewater reuse also include limits for trihalometanes. And so it is also really important to see if the process can form trihalometanes to avoid problem with compliance with the regulation. So we perform, as you can see from these other 2 groups of tests, we perform also tests 24 hours after disinfection treatment, oxidation treatment, and 48 hours. And you can see that while chloroform kept increasing in the free chlorine process, okay, in the 2 wastewater matrix, in the test with the UV radiation coupled to free chlorine, the formation of chloroform decreased. So this is really important results in my opinion, because typically wastewater are not reused just after the treatment, but sometimes they are stored before to be reused. So if we use chlorination, the formation of a trihalomethane can increase. So another interesting process that is attracting attention in the last year is also sunlight and UV coupled with the parasitic acid. This is also a work in collaboration with the Plataforma Solar de Almería, with Dr. Immaculada Polo Lopez and Dr. Pilar Fernandez at that time. And in this system, you can see the comparison between artificial UV light on the left and sunlight on the right side. So as expected, the process with the sunlight parasitic acid was less effective than the process where we combined the UVC radiation with the parasitic acid. So when we investigate the effect of advanced oxidation process, a really important issue is the formation of oxidation intermediates that can be more toxic in some cases than the parent compounds. So in this work that I already showed you before, we compared different solar-driven advanced oxidation processes. And as you can see, we observed the different efficiency of the process depending on the process applied on carbamazepine, diclofenac, and trimethoprim. In parallel, we performed the toxicity test, and this toxicity test did not provide, a regular trend in the toxicity, and this can be possibly associated with the formation of oxidation intermediates at a different time that can be more toxic than parent compounds. This is another example from colleagues from University of Cyprus, the group of Professor Despo Fatta-Cassinos, and they investigated the effect of ozonation as advanced treatment of urban wastewater, and in this case, they evaluated the effect in terms of toxicity, and you can see different conditions, different operating conditions in terms of hydraulic retention time, and you can see the effect on the toxicity according to the different condition, and as the hydraulic retention time increased, as you can see, the toxicity increased in parallel. Another work we also perform in collaboration with the University of Almeria, in such a case with Professor Ana Guerra, and also with Dr. Imma Polo Lopez from Plataforma Solar de Almeria. In this case, we evaluated the effect of sunlight hydrogen peroxide process on the removal of 3 contaminants of emerging concern, as you can see from the plot on the left side. And most important, we evaluated the possible uptake of these contaminants after irrigation for some weeks of lettuce crops. So in the upper plot, you can see the accumulation of the residual contaminants, in particular carbamazepine and triabenzazole on the lettuce. And as you can see, this accumulation increased as the irrigation time increased. We also find a residual concentration of these contaminants even on the topsoil. We should take into account that in such a case, we spiked the real wastewater with a higher concentration compared to the real one included into the wastewater. Then what is the effect of advanced oxidation processes on antibiotic resistance spread? So in this case, this is another work with colleagues from Plataforma Solar de Almeria, and we investigated the effect of different solar-driven advanced oxidation processes on a multi-drug resistant E. coli strain, which means an E. coli strain resistant to, in this case, I think at least 3 antibiotics. And so we, as you can see, we investigated the effect of different processes. In the figure A, you can see solar photophenton process in different operating conditions. In figure B, you can see the result of sunlight TiO2 process, sunlight H2O2, and in figure C, you can see the effect of sunlight TiO2 process with or without addition of hydrogen peroxide. And you can see that according to the cumulative energy accumulated by the solar reactor, we have different rate of inactivation for multi-drug resistant E. coli. So this is also, we investigate the effect of the sunlight peracetic acid process. And you can see in this case, the effect in 2 different water matrices. On the left, figure A, you can see the effect of the process on the groundwater purposely spiked with antibiotic resistant E. coli strain. On the right, you can see wastewater purposely spiked with the same antibiotic-resistant E. coli strain. And you can see that in most of the cases, the limit of detection was achieved during the process. So recently, with a collaboration of the Professor Jose Antonio Sanchez Perez from University of Almeria, we also investigate the effect of solar photophenton in the so-called raceway pond reactors. And we found that the process was affected in the inactivation of 3 bacterial families, total coliforms, E. coli, and Enterococcus, and even in the inactivation of the corresponding antibiotic-resistant bacteria. In this case, you can see the difference between sunlight hydrogen peroxide versus UV hydrogen peroxide. So in this case, on the left, you can find our work where we can achieve an high inactivation of an antibiotic resistance E. coli. And this is a work from Gu et al. And in this case, they use the UVC radiation for the process. So one of the main problems when we investigate the effect on antibiotic resistance is that when the bacterial cell is damaged, as I show you in one of the first slides, genetic material can be released. So the problem is to understand what happens to the released material, because this material can also contribute to transfer the antibiotic resistance. So in this work of us, you can see what was the effect on the process on intracellular DNA, this means that we extract the DNA and we are evaluating antibiotic resistance genes in the bacterial cell, and the difference with the total DNA, so including intracellular and extracellular. So when we evaluate the effect in total, in intracellular DNA, the problem is that as the process works, so the residual bacterial cells reduce, and those can be, in this case, quite difficult to evaluate the effect. But when we evaluate the effect on total bacterial cells in real wastewater, you can see that actually with the sunlight H2O2 process, the inactivation was quite poor of the target antibiotic resistance genes. Only in papers published in literature, this is again a work from Gu et al., you can see a good efficiency in terms of reduction of antibiotic resistance genes, but this for sure depends on the operating condition, the water matrix. So in this case, it's not actual real wastewater. The radiation is UVC radiation, and also depends on the target antibiotic resistance genes. Another problem is to learn if such condition can be applied, are feasible for full-scale application. In this work we performed in the framework of a European project, ANSWER project, we investigate the effect of heterogeneous photocatalysis on antibiotic resistance. In this case, we show that the process we investigated, which was cerium-doped zinc oxide photocatalyst, was more effective in our case than the benchmark P25, Degussa P25. So in this case, you can see two different plots, the effect on two different kind of bacteria, E. coli on the left and Pseudomonas aeruginosa on the right side. So, as I told you, the effect of advanced oxidation process in terms of operating condition include the catalyst oxidant dose, the UV light source and intensity, the water matrix in terms of intervening substances, the pH, and then the target antibiotic resistant bacteria and genes. In this work from Wu et al., published in Chemical Engineering Journal, they evaluated the effect of UV peroxymonosulfate process using different parameters. And so you can see in figure A the effect of peroxymonosulfate dosage. In figure B, you can see the effect on these antibiotic resistant genes and integron 1 in terms of UVC radiation intensity. Then in figure C, you can see the effect of pH. And finally, you can also check the effect of initial antibiotic resistant bacterial concentration. So in our one recent work, what we realized that actually the methods and techniques that we use to evaluate the efficiency of disinfection processes actually are not sufficient to evaluate the possible effect on antibiotic resistance spread. So as you can see in this picture, the process we investigated, which are photo-Fenton-like process with the copper to replace iron, was really effective in the inactivation of E. coli. But when we evaluated the effect of all the same processes in terms of inactive cells through flow cytometry measurements, you can see that the effect on the total bacterial population was poor compared to the effect on E. coli, because we have to take into account that when we use coliforms and when we use cultivation methods to evaluate the process efficiency, we are only evaluating a specific family. So we do not have an idea about the whole population. So in this case, you can see that through flow cytometry, you can see that best performance was in the inactivation of the total population was with the photofenton with the copper, photofenton process with copper, and we achieved the removal and inactivation of cells approximately of 40%. So this is also a comparison through antibiotic resistance genes and flow cytometry, using the same process and comparing these processes with UVC hydrogen peroxide. So I try to go fast in order to give you the chance to ask me some question. Another important issue, so to emphasize what I told in the previous slide, is this interesting work from Alexander et al. Dated back 2016. You can see the effect of ozonation process on the bacterial population. So you can see that how the process can select for bacterial population. So you can see that the population that was really low in terms of percentage before ozonation treatment, after the treatment, drastically increase in terms of relative abundance. And so we have to take into account this condition, and also that this infection process, as you can see from this other slide, other picture, can also affect the bacterial population in terms of mutation of microorganisms. And this is another possible problem in terms of prediction of a possible effect of advanced oxidation process on antibiotic resistance transfer. So fast to the conclusion. So as you saw from this presentation, advanced oxidation processes can effectively reduce most of contaminants of emerging concern in urban wastewater treatment. However, we have to take into account about their possible application at full scale, about the formation of oxidation intermediates that sometimes can be more toxic than parent compounds. So we have to fix and to adjust the process accordingly in order to avoid to have an effluent with a toxicity higher than the initial one. AOPs can also inactivate different bacteria, as I showed you in different slides, but in doing so, as you saw from the last few slides, they also select for bacterial population. And right now, we do not know how this will affect the potential of antibiotic resistance transfer. So the effect of advanced oxidation processes on antibiotic resistance genes depends on the type of a process, on the target antibiotic resistant genes, on the wastewater characteristics.
Sorry to interrupt. I think your voice is breaking now.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think your voice is breaking. Yeah, now it's clear. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So the effect of AOPs on antibiotic resistance, so genes depends on the AOP, the target antibiotic resistant genes, the wastewater characteristic, the operating condition, and sometimes, as I show you in some picture, we can achieve sufficiently high removal of antibiotic resistance genes, but this were demonstrated only at lab scale under conditions that sometimes are not feasible for full scale. So basically, we need the further work to evaluate the effect of advanced oxidation processes to effectively control antibiotic resistance spread in a real condition. So thank you for your attention. This is the last slide with the acknowledgement. I tried to put in most of my colleagues that I quoted in the previous work and in the previous slide, and this is most of the results that I show you are from our group and from collaboration with colleagues from other departments of University of Salerno, from collaboration with other Italian university and institute, and from collaboration also with colleagues from other countries, in particular from the group of Plataforma Solar de Almeria and the University of Almeria. So thank you for your attention, and any question from you is really welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for the detailed presentation. And there are a lot of questions from the participants. Let me consolidate and then I will present to you. First one, what about the impacts of surfactants that enter the water treatment unit? Is AOPs effective for the surfactants?
Yeah, this is This is when I talk in general about the effect of wastewater characteristics. This means that this include all the pollutants included in the wastewater. Then, actually, specifically on the surfactants, actually we can have different kind of surfactants. So this for sure, the specific effect depends even on the nature and the type of surfactants.
Okay. And regarding the photofenton process applied for emerging contaminants, if we use low concentration of reagents, is it not possible to use this approach as a pre-treatment strategy because of a lot of interferences? So how can I visualize this approach?
So if I well understood the question, if we can use the Fenton or photofenton process as a pre-treatment to remove contaminants of emerging concern?
Yeah.
You mean pre-treatment before biological process?
Yeah, yes, pre-treatment, because of a lot of interferences will be there, no?
Yeah, but okay. So you have a lot of interference. So first, if we are talking about urban wastewater. So in urban wastewater are biodegradable. Okay. So when you apply photofenton process, if you apply photofenton process before biological process, does not have so much meaning in urban wastewater. Typically, advanced oxidation process are applied as a pre-treatment before biological process when we talk about industrial wastewater, because in that case, the objective is to improve the biodegradability of the process before biological process. If we apply photofenton process or other advanced oxidation process before biological process in urban wastewater, the problem could be for sure the interference of some substances with the process, and the turbidity of wastewater also, because we talk about photo-driven processes, and this will result in an increasing demand of reagents for the process, and does not make so much sense, because biological process typically is a cheap process compared to other one. And so in this case, the objective of advanced oxidation process would be the removal of the residual contaminants, because we should also take into account that contaminants of emerging concern, at least part of them, can be also removed by the biological process, because entrapped in the sludge or because other mechanisms. So does not make so much sense to apply the process before, because this will increase the cost of the process and the cost of the reagents that are quite expensive, in particular hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah. And can you compare the photo-driven homogeneous reactions and heterogeneous reactions in terms of advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah. How long is this?
Yeah.
The answer is quite long to this one.
Long.
Yeah. So
yeah, you can add key points. You can add it.
Yeah, we can try in some way. Anyway, first depends what is the target water or wastewater matrix. Okay, so heterogeneous process are quite difficult to apply. In my experience, I talked about heterogeneous photocatalysis, so UV titanium dioxide or UV with other semiconductors to pre-treat industrial wastewater, in particular high polluting industrial wastewater, because of the high polluting loading. For some industrial wastewater, we talked about gram per liter of COD, for example, for olive mill wastewater, for landfill leachate, for textile wastewater. So in such a case, heterogeneous photocatalysis is not a suitable treatment, pre-treatment before biological process, because a lot of interference in the UV radiation from the turbidity and the suspended solids in the industrial wastewater And the technology is still not mature in terms of design of the reactor, in terms of to fix the catalyst on a support and so on. However, if we talked about advanced treatment of urban wastewater, this is another matter. I mean, in perspectively speaking, the heterogeneous photocatalysis can have some chance to compete with homogeneous process. For sure, the main difference also include that typically for some homogeneous process, for Fenton process and Fenton-related process, we have the formation of sludge, but we do not have formation of sludge in the case of heterogeneous photocatalysis. But as advanced treatment of urban wastewater, we do not have a formation of a significant sludge in the photofenton process, because as I told before, we work with a small concentration of reagents and iron, and so we can reduce drastically, even using chelating agents, the precipitation of iron. Anyway, in such a case, we perform some tests, in particular by comparing solar homogeneous advanced oxidation process and solar photocatalysis. I show you a couple of slides. And as you saw, the homogeneous process was much more effective than photocatalytic process in the removal of the target contaminants, which means that the process is more effective in producing hydroxyl radicals. And so with the heterogeneous process, we have limitation in terms of production of radicals compared to homogeneous one. I'm aware that this is not fully exhaustive explanation. This is asked for long. However, I think that some of information that I told you can be make clear these differences.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And can AOP be an effective method for treating the nanopollutants?
You mean AOP in general?
Yeah, in general, can it be effective for the degradation of nanopollutants? Since nowadays, lot many nanoparticles has been used in the synthesis part now.
Okay, if we talk particles, is something different compared to dissolved nanopollutants, no? Because, I mean, even the contaminants of emerging concern, pharmaceuticals, pesticide, and so on, some of these dissolved in water can occur at nanograms per liter or picograms per liter in the wastewater. But if we talk about nanoparticles, I don't think that the process can be effective in such a case. Normally, to make the process effective for the removal of nanoparticles, you should work on separation processes such as membranes in such a case.
Yeah. And have you tried to support the copper or iron catalyst for photofenton process? If so, which is the efficiency compared to homogeneous? Copper, or on comparing with copper or iron catalyst, which is efficient?
Okay, in our work, we did not compare with heterogeneous process. Our process was homogeneous. So with the support of our colleagues from Department of Chemistry, they synthesized this complex between copper and an organic matter chelating agent, IDS, and this is dissolved in water. This process we compared with classic photofenton with iron salt, with UV hydrogen peroxide, but we did not compare with heterogeneous photocatalysis. When we compared with the classic Fenton, a couple of the figures that I show you showed a higher efficiency in terms of, in particular, inactivation of bacteria. So in our case was more effective, but this is drastically affected by the characteristic of wastewater. I would like to remind you that most of our works include investigation in real wastewater matrix. So in real wastewater matrix, the effect of the process can change drastically depending on the characteristic of the wastewater, because we have a lot of possible interfering substances. The other day, I was discussing with my colleague from Almeria because we are preparing a paper, and we discussed about the effect of carbonates. So we investigate the effect on two types of wastewater, one with high carbonates, another one with low carbonates, and the effect of the process was drastically different. So with high carbonates concentration, the Fenton process was not as effective as ozonation. So the process efficiency should be evaluated according to different parameters, and particular to wastewater characteristics.
Yeah. And one question, there are a lot of publications on using various nanoparticles in AOPs, but is there any real application of nanomaterials apart from titanium oxide?
So if you talk in terms of application at full scale in wastewater treatment, I'm not aware of, in particular, no application to my knowledge to advanced treatment of urban wastewater, because right now, as I explained, the process is not yet competitive compared to ozonation for sure, but also compared to photo-driven homogeneous processes, because the cost, because the process is less effective than these processes. So reaction time is higher, which means larger volume of reactor. And the cost of technology is higher because we have two chances. We can apply the catalyst as a powder, as nanoparticles, and in such a case, we need a post-treatment to remove the nanoparticles before to dispose the treated wastewater. Otherwise, we can fix the catalyst on the support, and in such a case, the process is less effective than the suspended one, and the cost of the technology is expected to be higher compared to other processes.
Yeah. And one question, can different class of microbes play a major role in advanced oxidation?
Different class of, sorry?
Different genomes or genus of microorganisms play a major role in advanced oxidation.
Yeah.
Whether will it have the effects?
Yeah, because anyway, what we found in the literature, some of this paper I also showed you, that in some cases for some target antibiotic resistance genes, the investigator found a good efficiency in terms of advanced oxidation processes. However, sometimes it's not possible to compare these results because the experimental conditions are really, really different. So in some cases are just aqueous solution without any other compounds interfering with the process. The reactor in some time is a really easy system with a glass, in other cases a pilot plant. And so we cannot actually compare the conditions. So the wastewater matrix is different, the target gene is different, the operating condition in terms of UV light intensity or UV wavelength is different. So sometimes it's still quite hard to make comparison in terms of efficiency among different advanced oxidation processes on antibiotic resistance genes. And even is difficult because sometimes when we have the results, we can find that they investigate different antibiotic resistance genes. Yeah. So one recommendation that we gave with my colleagues in a recently published opinion paper, just published in Journal of Environmental Chemical Engineering, is write this one. Because in order to understand how this process affect antibiotic resistance genes, we should also evaluate specifically the antibiotic resistance gene.
Yeah. And thank you for, and I'm having two questions, Rizzo. Can you comment on advanced reduction processes?
Comments on in general?
Can you comment on advanced reduction processes, which involves high electron beams or gamma irradiation?
Okay. No, I cannot give you my opinion about these processes because I never worked on these processes. For sure, okay. I read some paper in about these processes, but right now my attention and the interest of our groups is to focus on processes that can be feasible to apply for urban wastewater treatment or industrial wastewater treatment in the short mid-term. And so we are trying to focus on specific advanced oxidation process, such as photo-driven homogeneous one. In some cases, you can see we also investigated heterogeneous photocatalysis in collaboration with our colleagues from Department of Industrial Engineering, because they prepared the photocatalyst. But so far, I did not focus my attention on this kind of process, so I cannot give you any opinion about these processes.
Yeah. And how far PFAS is regulated in European countries? Can you comment on that? Since you are working with a lot of regulatory aspects, can you comment on PFAS?
PFAS is poly.
Yeah,
What is?
polyfluoroalkyl
Yeah.
substances.
I cannot comment because I don't know. I know the pollutants, so my background is water and wastewater treatment, so my interest is specifically on water and wastewater treatment. So about the limit set by the regulation about this contaminant specifically, I do not know what is the limit at the European level actually, and I don't, because I never worked on this specific contaminants in our previous work. So I cannot provide any specific information. I had the chance to read some paper, even to review some paper about this compound and about the effect of the processes, but I do not have a specific experience. And so I'm not a toxicology, you know. What is really important, I think, is to emphasize now that all the work that you had the chance to look in my presentation is the result, as you can see from the acknowledgements, of a multidisciplinary work and multidisciplinary group. Yeah. And so we involved the material science people, we involved the microbiologists, molecular biologists, toxicologists. And so if we talked about regulation and the contaminants, value of the contaminants in this regulation, we should also talk with the toxicologists because they know this aspect better than us. So I cannot give my opinion about these contaminants in regulation and their possible effects.
Yeah. So thank you, Rizzo. I think all the questions has been answered very clearly, and I think it will be useful for the young researchers also. So thank you so much for your time, and definitely we will be in touch regarding the schools program of AOP also. So definitely I will be in touch with you, and looking forward some fruitful collaborations in future.
Okay, thank you, Padmanabhan. Thank you very much for your invitation, and bye-bye to everybody. And thank you for attending the webinar.